about you guys, but I think it has been way too long since we had a control arm building saga here on the channel, so good news, we've got 4 of these bad boys to build today. We are finally diving back into my 1931 Ford Model A project. We've got to rebuild the entire front end of this thing. So for the roughly, 100,000 or so subscribers that have joined since the last time we actually worked on this thing, here's a quick recap. As evidenced by everything piled on top of it, it's been a long time since I've worked on the Model A. It's been over a year and a half since our last meaningful episode, and given the growth of the channel, I'm assuming half of you guys aren't even familiar with this project. So for those that aren't, here it is. This is my 1931 Ford Model A closed cab pickup. Now if you look back, there are some really early StanceWorks videos about this truck, but I reintroduced it in October of 2021, where it sat without an engine thanks to melting a ring land on cylinder 8 thanks to too much boost. Now the previous engine never returned from the engine builder, so in its place, we bought a crate engine built specifically for supercharging, and it should have been much better suited for the project. We paired that with an all-new installation of a Haltech Elite 2500 standalone system, and eventually got it up and running a few weeks later. But the sense of victory was short-lived because we found out that our supposedly new engine was not so new. It had been disassembled and reassembled incorrectly at a Ford dealership and then sold to me. But after retiming the engine and following a tune-up from Andrew Molina at Animal Auto, we got the car running and driving the way that it should. But this project has fought tooth and nail every step of the way. So that success was short-lived too, because during a test drive, my steering linkage came apart, resulting in a bit of a fender bender, if it had fenders. Now the damage was admittedly pretty minimal, but I'm not one to turn down any opportunity to make my projects better, so I fired up Fusion 360 and redesigned all of the front suspension in order to eliminate some bump steer characteristics the truck was exhibiting in the past. From this point on, it was a process of slowly chipping away at cutting apart the truck and building a new chassis on the workbench. Across a number of episodes, we made some really good progress, but somewhere along the line, I lost a bit of motivation, and then the Model A just sat, exactly like this, for months and months and months. But that brings us to today, because I'm finally feeling some motivation with the Ferrari on the other side of the world to put this thing back on the street. And so that's where we pick up, literally, by picking up CAD templates for our new control arms. Now, if you're new around here, control arms and I have a bit of a special relationship. I built more than my fair share of them, striving for perfection when it comes to our Ferrari 308 project. But this time around, it's an act of necessity, because our control arms were bent in our fender bender and we're making some changes to the geometry itself. However, we do need to rescue and reuse the ball joint cups from our old control arms. We had these parts custom machined by Brett Walker across the street for the Model A, and given that I don't want to go through that process again, we might as well just cut the old ones up given that they're trash already. The rest of our parts, however, will be brand new, including the ball joints themselves, given that they were trashed during the removal process. The rescue process is far from a glamorous one. We're just going to run our old parts through a dying bandsaw blade, saving only what we need. Following that comes the cleanup process, because we've got tube ends and weld that we need to remove from these ball joint housings. I've had a number of opportunities to put this disc sander to work, but this is by far the best use yet. It made immediate work of the welds left on these things. From here, it's a game of precision, but it's precision by any means necessary. I never said that it had to be glamorous. The effort at hand is to simply clamp all of our parts to our accurate CAD-printed template. As long as everything is at the correct angle and in the correct position, the tubes that connect these parts aren't hugely consequential. Because of that, we don't need to build a complicated jig, and instead we can confirm our new control arms are correct by matching them both to the template and to some of the undamaged old parts. Now for those that like the nerdy details, we're using all 5/8 18 Heim joints and 1-inch 120 wall DOM tubing for both the upper and lower control arms. By virtue of the joints that we're using, the upper control arms are symmetric side to side, so those can be built at the same time. The lower control arms, though, are offset in order to achieve the correct caster angle. Given that the lower ball joint needs to cant inwards for the correct KPI or kingpin inclination angle, they can't be built identically. Now, plenty of you guys are probably wondering, Mike, how do you know this stuff? And the answer is I've spent way more time than I'd like to admit reading books, forums, and using a number of suspension calculators. I'm not a professional, and I'd never claim to know everything, but there are at least a handful of basic rules you can apply to any double wishbone suspension. We proved that it worked on the Ferrari, and thankfully we can confirm it here. Given that we're TIG welding everything, we want as tight of a fit-up as we can achieve. I'm giving it my best eyeball shot, but thankfully we've got Chloe watching over as well to make sure the quality control process is on point. After a full day of perfecting tube fitment on all 4 control arms, we're finally ready to start sticking stuff together before we put it on the car for a test fit. If I'm honest, I have a terrible habit of fully welding parts before I check and make sure that they fit. But thankfully, I was patient, and with a handful of tack welds, we got everything bolted to the chassis, and confirmed we nailed it. Now, some of you may remember, the goal of our suspension redesign was to fix some bump steer characteristics, and while I don't demonstrate it here, trust me when I say it looks better than ever before, and I think the Model A is going to drive its best yet. But how we're accomplishing that bump steer fix is by repositioning the steering rack, which means we've got to get the steering rack mounted to the subframe. Now, for better or worse, and emphasis on worse to be clear, Woodward Steering has some frustratingly designed mounts on their racks. Now, I'm sure there's some logic behind it, but I've yet to be able to figure it out, and thus, as a result, we've got to build some weird ways to mount it. Now, these bevel-cut tubes will allow us to bolt the rack to the chassis and bolt these mounts down to the table so everything is fixed and square. It's a weird way to accomplish it, but it's the best way I could conjure up, especially given the way that I did this previously, which was much less elegant. Now, given how we built the rest of this chassis, it would have been nice to have some laser-cut parts from Sendcut Send, but I knew that this one was going to have to be done the old-fashioned way. I don't have a 3D scan of these parts, and I'd have to mock it up and get it perfectly centered on the table itself. So each side is slightly different, but that's part of the design. It's part of what makes the Woodward rack kind of bizarre. It's asymmetric. But that won't slow us down. We've got some nice sheet metal mounts and our tube bungs in place, and it's just a matter of burning it all together so that we can cross this off the list. The finished result is looking pretty decent, and I'm a lot happier with this frame than I am with the original one. Not only does it look better, but it's a lot more rigid, as well as having better geometry, serviceability, and it has room at the front for components like the heat exchanger and the fans. The big question now is, does it have room for our new oil pan? Without exact dimensions of this thing before buying it, I took a guess that it would fit. The idea is to make it clear with about this much room. Now we're making the swap because we need that clearance due to the new design, but we're going to gain the added benefit of increased oil capacity and, more importantly, internal baffling around the sump, which will help with oil starvation and cavitation should this thing ever see some serious G-forces. The only thing to note is, we need to install this pan before we weld the chassis into place. It is possible to change the pan after the fact, but it's not going to be easy because it requires pulling the engine. Some might consider this a design or engineering flaw, but I call it a packaging constraint given how small we want the wheelbase of the truck to be, how low we want the engine to sit, and how we want to have no front overhang in front of the wheels. Now, as with any engine that has a block and timing cover surface that meet, it's always a good idea to add some sealant like RTV or Durco on those joints, even if you're using a brand new gasket. On the note of new gaskets, our Coyote gasket happens to include the windage tray built into it. It's something I've never seen before, but I thought it was pretty cool, and so I'm pointing it out so you guys can take note as well. As one might anticipate, the pan fit up perfectly, and it looks like we're going to have the clearance we're looking for. It's just a matter of lifting our new chassis up into place for confirmation. Due to being held by a hoist, the engine's sitting at a slightly upward angle, but with everything in place, it's looking good. We'll need to lower the engine down into its final resting place, but to do that, we're going to need to build some engine mounts. Without any 3/16 material on hand, I'm going to cannibalize some Ferrari mounts that we didn't use during the project so we can get these built quickly and effectively. The Ford Coyote is not known for being a light engine. There's a lot of weight involved with a dual overhead cam V8, and it tips the scales at a staggering 445 pounds, not to mention the extra minimum 100 we've added on top with a blower. So we need some mounts that are guaranteed to hold the weight and the torque this thing's going to put out, thus the heavy-duty mounts welded directly to the chassis. Now, while I get these parts welded up, I'm going to take a quick second here and make note of the fact that this episode and most of my episodes aren't sponsored by anybody. It's because I value the integrity of my content, and I don't want to be shilling out mobile phone games or vitamin supplements. So instead of that, if you're looking for a way to support this channel and this content, you should head to the StanceWorks Patreon, which gives you a behind-the-scenes look at all of the projects in the shop and all of the updates I don't share here. On top of that, it gives you early access and discounts to StanceWorks merchandise, and most importantly, it gives you access to the private channels of the StanceWorks Discord. So hit the link in the description if you're looking for a way to support this content. Now meanwhile, I've made an effort to get our steering linkages built, and what's important is that this time it does not come apart. So we're going to take some extra steps to ensure that. It's also good practice to add a support or heim joint between every U-joint in the steering shaft, and due to the odd path ours has to take, we're going to add 2. But that'll come in the next episode. For now, let's turn our attention to the valve covers. In the accident, the front grille shell was pushed back just enough to crack the passenger side, which is unsurprising given that it's made of plastic. Upon initial inspection, I was worried that there would be a piece missing and lost inside the engine, but after removing it, it was clear that it was simply stuck to the inside and folded out of the way. I think we're set. So just like the bottom of the block, we're cleaning up the factory sealant and applying some fresh stuff before we install some new aluminum valve covers. Now, it's hard to justify purchasing something like this over the factory parts, but I figure if I'm going to spend several $100s on factory plastic ones, why not upgrade things while we're at it and give the engine a little bit more flavor from the outside? In the next episode, we're definitely going to have to tackle the fuel injectors because, well, I broke the golden rule. I parked this thing with E85 in its system, and it's been in there the entire time. For those that aren't aware, E85 is incredibly corrosive, so we're going to need to replace a lot of components, but we'll just add it to the list of making this truck better than it's ever been before. For now, though, let's focus on making progress with the parts that we have. I threw some paint on the front end of the chassis because it would be impossible to paint it in place without removing the engine, and that seems like juice that's not worth the squeeze. But if we leave the bases of these frame rails unpainted, we can weld them into place and then do just a little bit of touch-up. After letting the paint dry for a few hours, we can bolt the steering rack into place. And then we can transition back into the shop where we can turn our attention to the truck side chassis. we'll need to do a bit of prep work before we can start welding. All of our mating faces need to be at the exact correct angle. We also need to make sure there's no paint in the way, because welding will contaminate our welds. Now, given that we're going to lift the chassis into place for the final time, there is a lot of measuring involved. Not only do we need to make sure that the chassis legs are the exact same length, but everything needs to be level, square, and plumb. Now, maybe that sounds simple on the surface, or maybe it doesn't, but the truth is, this is hours of work summed up into only a handful of seconds of video. For example, we need to make sure that the truck and original chassis are sitting level and square with Earth. Following that, we need to make sure that both sides of our new chassis also sit level and square. Now, some of that comes down to the quality of work I did when I welded this thing together on the workbench, but the rest of it is important here and now. Now, it's simple to make sure that it's level in one axis, in this case transversely, down the length of the truck. But once we add some tacks into place to keep it from going anywhere, we also need to make sure that it's level transversely, or to put it simply, side to side. Pulling out even 1/10 of a degree in one place can make the entire thing shift. So it becomes a delicate balancing act if we want to make sure that everything is true and straight, especially given we want to make sure that the truck tracks straight down the road. It's not impossible to do all this work without a chassis table, but it definitely takes a while longer to pull off. Once I was sure everything was where I wanted it, I laid down some welds to make sure it would stay in place forever. That means at this point there's not a whole lot left. We just need to install all of our newly finished suspension components, we need to lay down a little bit of paint, lay down a few welds, and redo our fuel system. And then this thing should be back on the street. So subscribe if you haven't, so you don't miss the next episode, and we'll see you next week.